Alright, in this video I'm going to go over the role of glial cells in health, aging, and disease. Please keep in mind that almost everything I'm going to say is a bit of an oversimplification of a much more complicated topic, but I think I'll be able to cover some of the basic concepts to help you understand how these cells play a role in how we age and in some of the diseases that form as we age. To talk about this, I've created a couple characters that I think will help me explain these concepts a little bit better. Now, in a previous video, I went over the roles of each of these characters, so I won't be going into too much detail about the basic functions of them. But I just want to introduce you first to Nuri the neuron. He's an excitable little fellow who spends his days busily sending action potentials down his axons to neighboring cells to communicate his messages. Then we have Mira the microglia. She's probably the most temperamental of all the different cells that we're going to be talking about, and she spends her days scavenging patrolling her environment, making sure that it is free of all debris and cleaning up any invaders that might come into her area. Next we have Astro the astrocyte. He's the most multifarious of all of these different cell types, playing a variety of different roles from scaffolding to communication to just ensuring everybody has all the nutrients they need to live long, healthy lives. And then finally we have Ollie the oligodendrocyte. He's a clingy little fellow who wraps his processes around neuronal axons to make sure that they can send their messages across, and so that the brain has all that it needs to relay all the important messages to all the different parts of the body. So here we have a very basic model of a section of a human brain. I want to emphasize again that this is a simplified version of what the brain looks like, and obviously this is a much more cartoony version of what the real thing looks like, but I do think it's useful in helping illustrate some of the basic concepts behind how the brain works, and in particular the role of glial cells in the brain. So we'll zoom in first on a relatively healthy section of the brain, and you'll see a variety of different kinds of cell types. You'll notice also that there are two different types of astrocytes present, and that's because it's been pretty well described that there are two main types of astrocytes called A1 astrocytes and A2 astrocytes, but we won't go into too much detail about the differentiation between those two. But I do want you to take note of the various roles that these glial cells are playing. Microglia, you'll see, are just kind of roaming about, independent more or less, making sure that the area is relatively clean and ensuring that there's nothing too harmful to the neurons in the population or to the other cell types as well. Oligodendrocytes, you'll see, little ollies all over the place. They are all connected to neurons. They are very important, of course, to myelinating neuronal axons and helping get their messages across from one part of the brain to another. Without them, the axons would not have the insulation needed to send their messages across. Then astrocytes kind of fill in all the rest of the roles that the brain plays. And there's a variety of different things that they do, but they are pretty populous, and you'll find them in abundance in a variety of different sections of the brain. But one thing I want to note is that even in a relatively healthy section of the brain, there are subtle things going wrong that the brain is constantly monitoring and checking and ensuring that the brain is in good enough health. Up here, you'll see one of these astrocytes seems to be kind of fading a little bit. It doesn't seem to be in the best of health. And when that happens, microglia tend to accumulate around those cells and try to give it the support it needs to recoup, or if needed, to degrade the cells and make sure that they don't cause too much damage, that they don't become senescent cells, which are cells that start to spew all sorts of toxins into their environment and can become relatively harmful to the rest of the brain. But anyways, that's a general overview of a healthy section of the human brain. Now we're going to move into an area where there's a lot more going wrong. Here we have an area of glial scarring taking place. Oops. Let's go back to that. So here you'll see the yellow and blue astrocytes. So some of these astrocytes have become reactive. They've become reactive in response to some kind of insult that the brain has overcome here. And there's also microglia that have swarmed around as well. But what happens is that astrocytes, once they notice that a section of the brain has become almost irreparably damaged, they form these glial scars, which is pretty similar to scar tissue in the rest of the body. It's an area of the brain that is no longer that functional, but they are able to maintain or control the damage done by forming these glial scars around certain areas to ensure that the brain remains relatively healthy. Also down here you'll see that there's been a virus that has come and infected the area. You see microglia surrounding those viruses and trying to clean them up and make sure that they don't run amok and cause too much damage in the brain. In a healthy brain, all of these things are relatively normal. They happen pretty frequently, and it's nothing that the brain can't control. But once a brain becomes a little bit aged and loses some of its ability to perform these tasks properly, that's when damage can start to spiral. And that's what we have down here. So here we have a section of the brain that has aged pretty rapidly, at least in comparison to the previous section that you saw before. And you'll see that the glial cell population has become much more sparse. The glial cells themselves are no longer as distinctive as they once were, indicating that they can't perform their roles as efficiently as they once were able to. You also see much more protein accumulations. It becomes easier for proteins to build up and form Lewy bodies or other supposedly toxic substances that do harm to the brain. You also see that there's more scarring taking place, and there are less cells in the area to ensure that all of the damage that's being done is contained properly. So that is a general overview of the brain in health and disease.